Welcome to Father Matt's Bible Studies and Sermons videos and podcast. In today's Bible study, we study the Pentateuch, beginning with Genesis and continuing with Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. God bless you and hope you enjoy the Bible study. Let us pray. Almighty God, we ask your blessing on our Bible study this morning. Be with us as we continue to read the book of Exodus, and bless all who are out in the cold. All this we ask through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
All right, we are continuing in chapter, which one is it? Actually, if I go down, it's quicker. Chapter 15. So the chapter division here is odd, to be perfectly honest. Like, sometimes it makes sense, and I've said this a couple of times, that the chapters are later divisions that get added. But you'd kind of think that the songs following the Exodus and the end of them would be the end of the chapter. But it's not. And so we stopped last week right after the second song, the one from Miriam, which is pretty much identical to the first verse of the first song of Moses. And we did not read Bitter Water Made Sweet. Now, what we're going to read today is some of the primary miracles that happen in the wilderness. Bitter Water Made Sweet is one. Another one is the manna. A third one is related to the manna. It's the quails. That comes down, I think, as well in what we're reading today. And the fourth one is water from a rock. And keep an eye out. I'm not going to focus too much on different narratives and what have you today. It doesn't really matter all that much. But essentially, the two water ones are one narrative, and a very small chunk of the manna is the same narrative. And then the other one will actually have the water stuff, but much later, like around Numbers or something like that. So they share the same narratives, but they get plunked into different places. And the second one that doesn't have the water here has a lot more on the manna, and surprise also gives cultic stuff around how the manna relates to the Sabbath. So we'll see some of that. And the other thing that I hope we'll get to today is one of the lesser read but kind of neat stories. It's the first battle that happens out in the wilderness, and it's I think it's the one, where Moses has to put his arms up, and every time he lowers his arms, like, they start losing the battle, and they have to put his arms up, and they eventually raise his arms. And this is one of those stories. It doesn't fit with any of the Gospels, really, so we never read it, which is too bad. So we'll get to read it today, which I think is fun. All right, JD, can you read Bitter Water Made Sweet? It's just to the end of this chapter.
Okay. Then Moses ordered Israel to set out from the Red Sea, and they went into the wilderness of Shur. They went 3 days into the wilderness and found no water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink the water of Marah because it was bitter. That is why it was called Marah. And the people complained against Moses, saying, "What shall we drink?" He cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood. He threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. There the Lord made them a statute and an ordinance, and there he put them to the test. He said, "If you will listen carefully to the voice of the Lord your God, and do what is right in his sight, and give heed to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will not bring upon you any of the diseases that I brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you." Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they camped there by the water.
All right. So just a couple of things. I said I wasn't going to dwell too much on the narrative stuff, but they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water doesn't match up with and then they got to Mara and there was water there, but they couldn't drink it. If you actually think about it for a second, like there's no water and then actually there's water. So there's no water matches up with this. Then eventually they got to Elam where there was water. And so you've got, again, there's a water problem right at the beginning, and it's solved in two different ways. One is they find the springs. The other is the Lord starts doing miracles for them. And we will see another one in a little bit. Let's see, where did it go? Mara, right? The word Mara, I'll just look it up. Mara is Z, and it means bitterness, right? So there's a name, Mara, which is the place. If you ever do the Stations of the Cross, for what it's worth, the Stations of the Cross has a line that says, talks about Mary and compares it to Mara here because her soul is bitter at the crucifixion, which is an interesting thing. So this story gets picked up in a variety of ways in terms of the bitter water. But this is important as well. So two things come out of this, right? One, the people complain. This is a regular theme, and interestingly, it's a constant regular theme in all of our three narrative sources that come up, but they complain at different times. So in this narrative, they start complaining from the beginning, and what's interesting is that they'll keep complaining, and the miracles will keep coming, and they'll keep complaining, which is kind of weird, but that's the way it is. And the other thing is, the Lord puts them to the test with this statute, right? And the statute is that, this is interesting, like all this is that they have to listen to God, keep his commandments and his statutes, but we don't know what they are yet, right? So we'll get them eventually. And if they do this, the deal is they won't get the plagues that the Egyptians got while they were in Egypt. Any other comments on this? All right. I don't know why my thumb just went up. That's funny. Okay. Okay. This is long, so we're going to divide it up. Charlotte, can you read verses 1 through 12 of the Bread from Heaven section?
Okay. The whole congregation of the Israelites set out from Elim and came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had departed from the land of Egypt. The whole congregation of the Israelites complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat and ate our fill of bread, for you have brought us out into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I am going to rain bread from heaven for you, and each day the people shall go out and gather enough for that day. In that way I will test them, whether they will follow my instruction or not. On the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather on other days." So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, "In the evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your complaining against the Lord. For what are we that you complain against us?" And Moses said, "When the Lord gives you meat to eat in the evening and your fill of bread in the morning, because the Lord has heard the complaining that you utter against him, what are we? Your complaining is not against us, but against the Lord." Then Moses said to Aaron, "Say to the whole congregation of the Israelites, draw near to the Lord, for he has heard your complaining." And as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the Israelites, they looked towards the wilderness, and the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. The Lord spoke to Moses, "I have heard the complaining of the Israelites. Say to them, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall have all your fill of bread. Then you shall know that I am the Lord your God."
Okay. So it's there's two bits of this going on at the exact same time. This little section is a follow-up from our first narrator, and the way you can tell is because it's about the test, right? Remember we got the test before? It actually matches up. It's the same thing is going on. There's bread from heaven going on in both things. One has quails and bread, the other has just bread. But the test here is that that they're only supposed to gather enough for the day. That's the test, right? And on the sixth day, there'll be twice as much. And in the other narrative, which is the one that has all the bits about the days and the times and what have you, because that's what that narrative cares a lot about, they complain because there's no food. And so Moses and Aaron, it picks up again here, say, okay, we'll do this. And you'll see the glory of the Lord. And why do you complain? And yada, yada, yada. And there's going to be, what is it? Is it quails at night? Yes, at twilight there's quails. And in the morning there's bread. And we will see this again later. So it's essentially, though, what's going on here is you've got two versions of the exact same thing, which is why it feels like a little bit of duplication, not tons. Any comments on this? All right. Does it have a name yet? The bread. Anybody notice that?
Manna?
Not yet. Yeah, we'll get
Not yet?
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, not yet. Right.
that's
Okay.
a big reveal.
Okay.
Yeah, not a huge reveal, but but we don't have a name yet for it, right? So, and we don't know what it looks like, right? So we'll get the description and all this stuff. I've said quails, but I may have jumped the gun. Is it just meat at this point?
Yeah, it's just me.
Just
Right.
meat.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Therese, can you read 13 through 21? If I can get there. Start right here. You're muted, though, so unmute.
That would help. In the evening, quails came up and covered the camp. I can't say.
I'll read the last line, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the.
Okay, where are we? Okay, the camp. When the layer of dew lifted, there on the surface of the wilderness was a fine, flaky substance, as fine as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they said to one another, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, "It is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather as much of it as each of you needs, an omer per person according to the number of persons, all providing for those in their own tents." The Israelites did so, some gathering more, some less. But when they measured, it was one. Is it Omar? Omer?
Yeah, Omer. Yeah.
Okay. Those who gathered much had nothing over, and those who gathered little had no shortage. They gathered as much as each of them needed. And Moses said to them, "Let no one leave any of it over until morning." But they did not listen to Moses. Some left part of it until morning, and it became wormy and rotten. And Moses was angry with them. Morning by morning, they gathered it as much as each needed. But when the sun grew hot, it melted.
Great. Okay. Again, you can sort of see the division here, I think, if you look carefully. The test that we started in verse 4 to 6, right? On the sixth day, this and that, remember, don't do this, picks up again at the tail end of this when Moses says, don't leave any of it until morning, but they didn't listen to Moses. So they fail the test, right? And if you skip this verse 19 and 20, if you just skip it, it reads just fine, right? But when they measured it with an omer, those who gathered had nothing, those who gathered had little. They gathered as much as each of them needed. Skip 19, 20. Morning by morning, they gathered it as much as they needed, but when the sun grew hot and melted. So in one narrative, there's no test. In the other, there is a test, for what that's worth. But it's the same result. In one, they get exactly what they need. In the other, they get exactly what they need, and if they fail the test, it just melts away anyway, right? If that makes sense. Like the difference is some try to measure it this and that. It doesn't make any difference when they're measuring it. They get what they need, and then the other one they can take as much as they want, but if they leave any over, it melts. Let's look at this. I'm intrigued to see what this note B says. B. Or it is manna. So this is interesting. I don't know the Hebrew on this at all, but there's probably, what is it? Could be, is it manna? It's probably two different variants in the text. I don't know. My guess is it's probably what is it originally, because they don't know what it is until later. And did they name it in this? Patrice, did you read where they named it or not? Did they call it manna yet?
No, they didn't call it manna yet.
Okay.
No.
I do like this. So when you read it, it was like, is it omer? Well, later they're like, does it say how much an omer is? I think it does, right? An omer is whatever. Where does it say what an omer? Does it say what an omer is?
No, I don't think
No.
so.
Mhm.
Just a no.
It will later.
Yeah.
Somebody asks that question at some point. It's like, what is an omer? I think it says it later that it tells what an omer is. So there's some funny stuff in this as you kind of go through. All right. So the end result is this is interesting. Both of the narrators have bread from heaven. One of them has quails right now. The other one, I think, eventually gets quails. But both also have a reality that the manna doesn't. It's a single day thing. And as I think we saw, well, we'll read in a second. As we saw earlier in verse 5, I think, right? They're already told in advance, oh, by the way, you're going to need twice as much on the sixth day, right? So you're getting into a Sabbath thing, even though we haven't gotten the 10 Commandments yet, right? Just something to keep in mind. Okay. Mary, can you read, or are you in a place where you cannot read? All right,
I'm on the train. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
JD, can you do 22 through the end of the chapter?
Okay. On the sixth day, they gathered twice as much food, 2 omers apiece. When all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, he said to them, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow is a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you want to bake and boil what you want to boil. And all that is left over put aside to be kept until morning." So they put it aside until morning, just as Moses had commanded them. And it did not rot, and there were no maggots in it. Moses said, "Eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the seventh day, which is a Sabbath, there will be none." On the seventh day, some of the people went out to gather, and they found none. The Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and instructions? See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the sixth day, he gives you food for 2 days. Each of you stay where you are. Do not leave your place on the seventh day." So the people rested on the seventh day. The Israelites called it manna. It was like white coriander seed, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. Moses said, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Let an omer of it be kept throughout your generations, in order that they may see the food with which I fed you in the wilderness when I brought you out of the land of Egypt." And Moses said to Aaron, "Take a jar and put an omer of manna in it, and place it before the Lord to be kept throughout your generations. Just as the Lord commanded Moses, so Aaron placed it before the covenant for a safekeeping. The Israelites ate manna for 40 years until they came to a habitable land. They ate manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. An omer is a tenth of an ephah.
All right, great. So we'll start with the last verse. Very helpful, assuming you know what an ephah is. right? So, like, you do get that sometimes in the Bible where it's like, oh, right, they might not know what this is. So let's see what an ephah is. Ephah. Ephah is an ancient Hebrew unit of dry measure, equivalent to approximately 1 bushel, 32.5 liters, or 10 omers. So at least the AI overview seems to think that it is about 3.5 liters worth of dried stuff. So a gallon of dry stuff, give or take. All right, let's go back. And this is kind of in 3 parts. In fact, it's actually completely in 3 parts. So this first paragraph that JD read is we've run into this narrator a couple of times. This is the one that likes to throw in, we've got a reference to this. Let's throw in a cultic ritual, right? So you have a much more heavy-handed observance of the Sabbath right here than we've seen. And it's the first one that talks about, I don't think we've gotten solemn rest, right, at all. Now we've suddenly got this, and it's picking up off of a couple of things, the creation one, and now we've got the manna one. And so you've got 2 things where there's the 7th day has some meaning, and so it's now formally becoming, and I think this is the first time we've seen this, it's now formally becoming something that they're required to do beyond the action of the narrative, right? If you go up earlier, it was the action of the narrative was simply that, we'll see it in a second, but was simply that there's not going to be any on the 7th day, so don't collect it. And that was the test earlier. Now there's not going to be any on the 7th, and this is because this is a day of solemn rest, a Sabbath that is holy to the Lord, and they're not allowed to bake and boil things on the Sabbath, right? Note that. They're supposed to do this the day before, and they're not supposed to go out into the field and all of that stuff. And then there's this thing at the end, 6 days you shall gather it, but on the 7th day, which is a Sabbath, there will be none. So this is the more priestly narrator, and the concern about the Sabbath is pretty big. Our other narrator picks up right here, and this is the one that's been talking about the test. And if you follow it, and again, if you sort of drop out and go back to this section from 19, Moses said to them, let no one leave any of it until morning. This was the original test. There was a 2-part test. Don't gather any more than you need, and just don't leave any morning. And the other one was only gather 2 on the 2nd day. But they didn't listen to Moses. They left it until morning. It became wormy and rotten. That picks up right here. On the 7th day, some of the people went out to gather, and they found none. And the Lord said to Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my commandments and instructions? Remember we saw that earlier? If you keep my commandments and instructions, you won't get the plague in Egypt. Right? We'll see some of that later. See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the 6th day, he gives you food for 2 days. Each of you stay where you are. Do not leave your place on the 7th day. So you get the same thing. But the reason it sounds like it happens twice is because it kind of does. Right? You get one, and then you get the other. And it's the narrators are telling the exact same thing. But in a normal book story, you shouldn't be able to divide it and say, here's 2 paths that say the exact same thing. But you can do this in Exodus. And it's likely because there's 2 different narrators. All right. This last section is back to our priestly friend, right? So this is one thing, and then this picks up here. And a couple of things in here. You get the name. It's called manna. I really like that. You get the description, right? It's like white coriander seed. You get a taste. Tastes like wafers made with honey. And then you get this really interesting thing. And think about this for a second. This is what the Lord has commanded. Let an omer of it. So now we know basically what an omer is, right? It's like a dry gallon, right? Or something like that. 3.5 liters dried, that sort of thing. So let's keep a bunch of it throughout your generations in order that they may see the food with which I fed you in the wilderness when I brought you out of the land of Egypt. It's like, okay, we're going to keep it forever. And Moses said to Aaron, take a jar, put an omer of manna in it. Then it gets a little weird. Place it before the Lord. What does that mean? Okay, to be kept throughout your generations. Just as the Lord commanded Moses. So this is what it means. Aaron placed it before the covenant. We don't have a covenant yet, right? Where was the manna kept? In the Ark of the Covenant. So this is kind of in the wrong place, right? Like, they haven't gotten that yet. And again, that's because the different narrators have different views. So they seem to already have this in this thread, for what it's worth, which is kind of interesting. So when you wonder where there's a couple of things that get kept in the Ark of the Covenant, and manna is one of them. The staff that Moses uses is another one. So just something to keep in mind, that you do run into some of this in the actual text, which is odd. So this is really weird that that's there, just throwing that out there. Anyway, they eat the manna until they come to the head of the land. And again, this is past tense. If you read it correctly, and you're thinking Moses wrote this, right? Moses never gets into the promised land. The Israelites ate the manna for 4 years until they came to a habitable land. They ate manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. So they stopped after that. All right, any comments on this?
Well, just one thing. They place it before the covenant. Isn't a covenant an agreement?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but we haven't talked about it yet with this crowd. The only covenants that we've had are it could be anything, right? But the covenant will turn into the Ark of the Covenant.
Right. I mean, but the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark is something, but a covenant itself is an agreement. So how do you put something like a jar before an agreement?
You don't. That's kind of the point. You don't. Like,
right.
Place it before. This is looking at, this is pre-assuming the tabernacle setup.
Okay.
Right? And when we get this will make a lot of sense, right? And again, the way you wrap your head around it, if you want, it's not that hard to wrap your head around it in terms of the literalist Bible narrative, right? If you're a literalist Bible narrative crowd and you say, Father Matt, everything you've been saying about narratives I don't care about and I don't like, I can give you a way to wrap your head around this just fine. This is narrated here, but it happens later. That's how you work your way around that, right? Moses says to Aaron, take a jar and put it, he narrates it, and then when they have the covenant, they finally do this, right? That's how you wrap your head around it.
Okay.
So it's not that hard in that sense, but if you read it that way, you find yourself doing that over and over and over again, where things that like seem out of the timeline pop up again and again and again, and you're constantly forced to sort of be like, I guess we'll just project that into a future thing and assume it happens when it does, right? And sometimes it does show up again, but that's often because the narratives are broken, or because every one of the narrators eventually gets to the same story anyway. They're just telling it in a different timeline as well. Does it matter? Not so much. Like what's really cool about this is, if you ever think of the Ark of the Covenant, well, the manna is in it, which is kind of cool, right? So that's kind of neat. All right, more water. Jump into water from a rock. Let's see. James, you're here. Can you read verses? Just read this water from the rock thing.
Okay. Water from the rock. From the wilderness of Sin, the whole congregation of the Israelites journeyed by stages as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. The people quarreled with Moses and said, Give us water to drink. Moses said to them, Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord? But the people thirsted there for water, and the people complained against Moses and said, Why did you bring us out of Egypt to kill us and our children and livestock with thirst? So Moses cried out to the Lord, What shall I do with this people? They are almost ready to stone me. The Lord said to Moses, Go on ahead of the people and take some of the elders of Israel with you. Take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile and go. I will stand there in front of you on the rock of Horeb. Strike the rock and water will come out of it so that the people may drink. Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. He called the place Massah and Meribah because the Israelites quarreled and tested the Lord, saying, Is the Lord among us or not?
Great. Okay. Another story, very similar, same thread. The people are constantly complaining, and there's this whole business of testing that's going on. And so you get another place that's named, which is Massa and Meribah. And if you look at C and D, it's going to be test and quarrel, right? So that's what those two names mean. This is interesting, which is the reference to the rock at Horeb. I want to go check the Bible Gateway and just see when Horeb first shows up. So we got Mount Horeb earlier with the burning bush, and now we get Horeb again, and we'll get it Mount Horeb again later. It's worth noting that, did we get Sinai yet? Let me see if we got Sinai. Can't remember.
Yeah, we did, didn't we?
Sinai, yeah, so
between,
between Elam and Sinai, right? We got that, and they're going to get to Mount Sinai in Exodus 19, and that's when the Ten Commandments show up. It's worth noting, this is a little confusing, that I'm pretty sure all of our narrators know of the names Sinai and Horeb, and some of the narrators put the primary appearance of the Lord and the Ten Commandments at Horeb, and some of them put it at Sinai. And so in some cases, in all cases, Sinai and Horeb are different. But what happens is, it's hard to explain that. So like one narrator has Horeb, the rock of Horeb, and this same narrator will have Mount Sinai later. And they're not the same place, but something big happens at what is important, I think, is that in all of the threads, Horeb and Sinai are places that important things happen that God does. It doesn't necessarily have to be the giving of the Ten Commandments. It can be a variety of different things. So we saw earlier the burning bush was at Horeb, and now we see that they're at the rock of Horeb. And is it the exact same place? Hard to tell, but it's an interesting reference point. It hasn't come up much. Any comments on this section that Jim read? Okay. All right. And now for something completely different, right? Now we're going to get a battle. And we haven't, if you remember last week, one of the things we learned was they were led, one narrator says, well, we're not going to go the direct way, which is the way of the Philistines, because I don't want the people to get into a battle at all. And the other narrator said, and they left armed for battle. Well, this one is the armed for battle, and this is kind of neat. We get Amalek, and so Charlotte, can you read the Amalek attacks Israel and is defeated narrative?
Okay. Then Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, choose some men for us and go out, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow, ooh,
Sorry, it just
that
go
was
away.
throws me. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses told him and fought with Amalek. While Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. Whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed, and whenever he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on either side, so his hands were steady until the sun set. And Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Write this as a remembrance in a book and recite it in the hearing of Joshua. I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven." And Moses built an altar and called it, "The Lord is my banner." He said, "A hand upon the banner of the Lord. The Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation."
Great. Okay, couple of things. One, this is not the first reference to Amalek. Amalek shows up in Genesis. The Amalekites show up in Genesis in pretty early chapter. I'm looking at it on in chapter 14. The name Amalek is shows up as one of the sort of offspring of Esau. Esau's wife, or one of Esau's concubines, bears Amalek, and Amalek shows up again. They're kind of related to Edom, Esau, and then they pop up again here, and they will pop up again in Numbers, and they will pop up in Deuteronomy, and Judges, and First Samuel, and Second Samuel, and First Chronicles, and in actually in Psalm 83 as well. My understanding is nobody knows who the Amalekites are, for what that's worth. But clearly, they're not liked, right? Whoever they were, this is a reference that there's going to be constant war with the Amalekites, with Amalek, from generation to generation. So that's number one. Two, who's this guy? Who is Joshua? Any idea? There's a whole book named after him, right? But this is the first time we've seen him. He's never popped up in our narrative, which is kind of funny, right? Everybody knows who Joshua is, so this is his first appearance. And we will see as we go forward that Joshua is Moses' kind of right-hand guy, and eventually becomes his successor. And who's this guy? Hur, right? He's another person that we've never encountered before, and he seems to tag along. So our leadership group all of a sudden has gotten a little bit bigger. Moses, Aaron, Hur, and Joshua seem to be there. Okay. Joshua shows up right here, actually, for the first time. Any comments beyond that? The story itself is pretty cool, right? I've always thought I always liked it. So they take stones, and so his arms can put on the stones and that sort of thing. Does it ever say that Moses has to do that? It doesn't, right? Like, it just seems to happen that if Moses does this, they win. And if he doesn't, they lose. So they put stones under his arm. And eventually Aaron and Hur hold his arms up. And they do this all day long. And they defeat Amalek with that. So here's a biblical thing that apparently doesn't work. I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under the sun. Right? So not so much, right? Like, not so much. As I said, Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Judges, 1st, 2nd Samuel, 1st Chronicles, and a Psalm. Amalek is all over the place. So that's just kind of funny. So there you go. This is interesting. The Lord is my banner. is the name of the altar. A hand upon the banner of the Lord. Let's see if the note says anything useful. E. Hebrew meaning uncertain. I like that when that happens. Okay. We have. I think we can finish this. We've got one more story in this. And for what it's worth, I didn't say this, but that whole Amalek thing is the third narrative voice that we haven't run into all that much, which is why it seems kind of out of left field here. And why is it put in at this point is a great question, and I don't have an answer for it other than the reference to Rephidim, that they were there earlier, and so maybe it gets plunked in because Rephidim was already mentioned. Okay. This continues the exact same narrative voice. Therese, can you read 1 through 12?
Sure. Jethro's advice. Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for his people Israel, how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. After Moses had sent away his wife Zipporah, his father-in-law Jethro took her back, along with her 2 sons. The name of the one was Gershom? How do you say that?
Gershom, doesn't matter.
Okay.
I mean, I shouldn't say it like that, but
I know.
I don't know. It doesn't-
Okay. For he had said, I have been an alien in a foreign land. And the name of the other was Elzir. And he had said, the God of my father was my help and delivered me from, can't see it.
From the sword of Pharaoh, Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, along
with Moses' son and wife, came into the wilderness where Moses was encamped at the mountain of God. He sent word to Moses, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons. So Moses went out to meet his father-in-law. He bowed down and kissed him. Each asked after the other's welfare, and they went into the tent. Then Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardship that he had found them on the way, and how the Lord had delivered them. Jethro rejoiced for all the good the Lord had done to Israel in delivering them from the Egyptians. Jethro said, Blessed be the Lord who has delivered you from the Egyptians and from Pharaoh. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods because he delivered people from the Egyptians when they dealt arrogantly with them. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and sacrifices to God. And Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law in the presence of God.
Great. Okay. Couple of things. One, Jethro, we've encountered him before, and if you remember, Moses' father-in-law has 2 different names. In one thread, he's Jethro, and the other, he's Reuel. So you can tell which one this is because it's the Jethro thread. And this is weird. I don't have any explanation for it. After Moses sent his wife away, so apparently Moses got married and then sent her away. There's some thought that these verses right here might be slightly, kind of an addition to it. But in any event, Jethro shows up with Moses' family, which is sort of the first reference that we've had at all that Moses didn't stay with them. Like, remember, he got married, and apparently he went back into Egypt alone and brought the people out, and now they meet up. So that's just kind of something in the story that I don't think gets talked about much. So they camp and they come to the mountain of God. That's an interesting one too. Like, we haven't really gotten that yet. We did get a reference to the rock of Horeb earlier. So one of the things that's going on in terms of why are some of these stories here is because we're getting ready to go and hear the Ten Commandments, right? So sometimes there's some sort of breadcrumbs laid out in advance, and I think that this is one of them. That, oh, this is where they are. Something's going to happen here, but we haven't gotten to it yet, for what that's worth. And interestingly, Moses tells him about the Egyptians and all the hardship along the way and how the Lord had delivered him. There's no reference to water from the rock. There's no reference to the manna. Again, this is a third narrative that hasn't had those things at this point. But in any event, they've been delivered from Pharaoh, and the response is kind of neat. Jethro worships the Lord and does a sacrifice, and in this case, it's God, which is interesting, but also the Lord there. So you get both. Here's another one. Monotheism. There's no overt monotheism at this point in the Bible, right? The Lord is one of the gods and greater than all the gods, but there's no concept that there's only one God. There is the idea that there's lots of different gods. And one of the things that makes the Lord different and special is normally gods are attached to people's homelands and stay there. And in this case, the Lord seems to travel around with them, which makes the Lord even more special, for what that's worth. Okay, any comments on that? All right. Charlotte, can you read the 13 to the end?
Okay. The next day, Moses sat as judge for the people, while the people stood around him from morning until evening. When Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, "What is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone, while all the people stand around you from morning until evening?" Moses said to his father-in-law, "Because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide between one person and another, and I make known to them the statutes and the instructions of God." Moses' father-in-law said to him, "What you are doing is not good. You will surely wear yourself out, both you and these people with you, for the task is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone. Now listen to me. I will give you counsel, and God be with you. You should represent the people before God and bring their cases to God. Teach them the statutes and the instructions and make known to them the way they are to go and the things they are to do. You should also look for able men among all the people, men who fear God, are trustworthy, and hate dishonest gain. Set them as officers over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Let them sit as judges for the people at all times. Let them bring every important case to you, but decide every minor case themselves. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this, and God so commands you, then you will be able to endure, and all these people will go to their homes in peace." So Moses listened to his father-in-law and did all that he had said. Moses chose able men from all Israel and appointed them as heads over the people, as officers over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens, and they judged the people at all times. Hard cases they brought to Moses, but any minor case they decided themselves. Then Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went off to his own country.
Great. Okay. This is the beginning of the structure of Judges, right? Which is kind of neat, and it it's pretty straightforward. I think that Moses is trying to do everything himself, and Jethro says this is going to wear you out. What you need to do is just teach the people what the statutes and instructions are, and the big stuff you can deal with, but divide them up into groups. And we haven't gotten a sense of tribes, but this seems to be the beginning of that in terms of how the divisions come about. And as you probably know, there's a book called Judges, which gives some example of how the local leaders did things and what have you. What's interesting is we haven't yet gotten the statutes and instructions, right? This is yet again, this keeps coming up, that there's sort of this assumed set of commands and instructions that's there, but we'll get them in chapter 19 and following is when we actually start getting these. The other thing that's interesting, I think at least, is we had a narrative about the Amalek, just before this, which actually illustrated that Moses couldn't do everything himself, right? He couldn't keep his arms up, and so he needed his supporters to hold his arms up during that. So you actually get that from a narrative perspective, and then Jethro comes along and says this is the same kind of thing in terms of how you're running the people. Any comments on this? Okay. Next week, we will pick up with 19. And remember what we just heard, that they were encamped at the mountain of God. In the next chapter, they get up, they start moving again, they go into the wilderness of Sinai, they journey from Rephidim, that was encamped at the mountain of God, enter the wilderness of Sinai, camp in the wilderness, and there they camp in front of the mountain. So, like, did they do a circle? Or is it two narrative threads, right, where they get to the... Right? Does that make sense? Like, you begin to spot these things where it's like, oh, okay. So, yeah, there's multiple things going on here. But we'll read that next week. And I think chapter 20 is the actual 10 commandments. And that's a whole other thing that we'll talk about too. So any final thoughts on anything we read today? All right. God bless. I will see you later. And for what it's worth, Mary sent me a note saying that I had forgotten to put the last 2 weeks on YouTube, and I had. They are both now up, and I'll put this one up immediately, and so it will be up as well if you want to go back and look. So I'll talk to you later. God bless.
Thank you.
No.
Okay, thank you.